I never thought I'd end up working nights at a gas station in the middle of the Nevada desert, but life has a funny way of putting you exactly where you need or are forced to be. My name is Daniel Foster, 22, and in the summer of 2011, I found myself behind the counter of Millstone Gas Deli, a lonely pit stop on Route 87 near Harlow. My dad had just lost his warehouse job. My mom was working double shifts as a nurse, and my little brother Josh was still in high school. Money wasn't exactly flowing in college. My dream of studying photography seemed more like a fantasy than a plan. I'd always been obsessed with cameras. Even now, while wiping the counter or rearranging shelves, I had my old digital camera tucked under the counter, snapping photos of neon signs and passing headlights, trying to capture the quiet beauty of the night. My mom didn't understand. And Dad said I needed to be practical. So here I was brewing cheap coffee, staring at a cash register that seemed to hate me more than anyone else. Night shifts were lonely, sure, but there was a rhythm to it. I knew when the highway would get a truck rolling past, when the ice machine groaned like it was about to collapse, and when the wind would push tumbleweeds against the doors. Most nights were uneventful, but some nights you learn that even the quietest places can hide something dangerous. That night the air was dry and sharp. By 12:30 a.m. the last car had gone down Route 87. I was refilling candy shelves when the register jammed, forcing me to count bills manually. Coffee spilled across my hand, stinging enough to make me mutter every curse I'd learned in high school. I wrapped it in paper towels, massaging the burn, trying to ignore the creeping unease crawling up my spine. And that's when I saw him. He was standing by the pumps, hunched slightly, shirt torn, dark stains across it that looked like blood. I froze for a moment, thinking maybe he needed help, maybe he was hurt, but then he leaned toward the glass doors. Pale face pressed against the window, lips moving silently. He didn't pump gas, he didn't ask for anything, he just stared. I swallowed hard, stepping back behind the counter, whispering to myself, "Stay calm, just stay calm." I grabbed the phone, trying to stay composed. "Sir, are you injured? Need an ambulance?" I called out. He just chuckled, dragging his gloved fingers along the glass, leaving streaks. That's when I noticed the knife glinting under the fluorescent light. My heart jumped straight into my throat. I locked the doors and dialed 911. The dispatcher's calm voice was a relief and a frustration at once. The nearest unit was 20 minutes away, 20 minutes in the desert with someone who didn't belong. I tried to steady myself, telling myself it was just a man who needed help, but deep down I knew better. The tapping of the knife against the glass was deliberate. He wasn't asking for help, he was testing me. I moved slowly to the back storage door, checking locks and jiggling handles to make sure everything was secure. My stomach churned as I shoved crates against the door. The lights flickered as a storm moved across the desert. And in that split second of darkness, I thought I saw him inside the store, silhouetted in the chip aisle. My breath came fast. I clutched the flashlight like a lifeline. I whispered to myself, "It's just shadows, it's just shadows." The wind rattled the windows, a soft warning, and I realized that even in a place I thought I knew, danger could hide in every corner. My adrenaline surged, my heart hammering, each creak of the building making me flinch. I kept a low profile, moving only when I had to. Every time he disappeared outside, I thought maybe he'd given up. Then he'd reappear, crouching by a window, tapping the blade gently on the glass. That laughter, a high, almost inhuman sound, made my stomach twist. I tried talking to him. "Sir, please just leave. I can't help you if you're hurting yourself." No answer, just that laughter and the glint of the knife catching the light again. I thought about my family, Mom working double shifts, Josh at home expecting me to send money. My dreams of photography sitting in a drawer collecting dust. I couldn't get hurt, not now, not when they were counting on me. I edged toward the office, hoping he wouldn't notice me, every step deliberate, careful, but the sense of eyes on my back never left. He was patient, letting me strain myself with fear, testing me, enjoying every second. Then I saw headlights, red and blue lights cutting across the desert. Relief surged, followed by guilt. I'd almost let panic win. Deputies ran toward him, weapons drawn, and he resisted, laughing until they wrestled him down. Turns out he'd escaped from a rehab facility, badly injured, walking along the highway until he reached my station. Everything made sense in hindsight, but it didn't make me feel safer. I called my mom at dawn, trembling, trying to explain the chaos. "Did your best, but I didn't feel like I had done anything. I just survived." "It's okay, Dan," she said. Even weeks later, I double-checked locks, windows, exits every night. The tapping of the knife against the glass haunted me. I realized that life isn't always about what you want. Sometimes it's about surviving what comes at you. I kept my camera with me, capturing the neon glow and quiet beauty, because even in fear, there's life to document. Danger can be random. Patience is a survival tool, and courage isn't about fighting. It's about enduring and protecting those who depend on you. I went back to school studying photography part-time, but I never forgot that night. It reminded me that even ordinary jobs, ordinary nights can teach you extraordinary lessons about resilience, vigilance, and human fragility. Life doesn't always follow a fair path. Courage often isn't about fighting. It's about staying calm, staying vigilant, and surviving for those who depend on you. True bravery is enduring fear while protecting what matters most. I used to think delivering food at night was just another boring gig. My name is Marcus Reed. I'm 27, a community college dropout who once dreamed of running a small music studio. That dream didn't exactly pan out. A failed business loan, a couple of years' worth of debt, and a handful of dead-end jobs later, I was driving for a food delivery app in Toledo, Ohio, trying to keep my head above water. Night shifts paid better, fewer cars, fewer interruptions, and I told myself it was safer than driving through rush hour traffic. That night started like most others, tense, tiresome, and frustrating. At 10:40 p.m., a drunk customer cursed at me for being too slow, though I'd been stuck behind construction for nearly 10 minutes. I gritted my teeth, muttered an apology, and kept going. By 11:15, my tire pressure light started flickering. I pulled into a gas station to top off air, my hands greasy from the pump nozzle. I was already tired, shoulders aching, stomach tight from nerves and too much coffee, but I accepted one last order before heading home, telling myself it would be easy. The app pinged a delivery on Forest Sycamore Street, a part of town I barely knew. Driving into the neighborhood, the houses looked like they'd been abandoned for years. Boarded up windows, overgrown yards, and porch lights flickering on and off gave everything an eerie glow in my headlights. I muttered, why do these late-night orders always land me in places like this? At Rye 12:25 a.m. I found the house number cross 6. Its paint was peeling, the porch sagging under the weight of rusted bikes and a swing that looked like it hadn't moved in a decade. I double-checked the order on my phone. 2 cheeseburgers and fries prepaid, no name, no special instructions, just a bare address. I knocked on the door, at first nothing, then it creaked open a few inches. A woman appeared, late 30s, hair tangled, eyes sunken like she hadn't slept in days, wearing a faded sweatshirt. She didn't speak, only whispered. Set it on the table inside. I hesitated. My instructions clearly said no contact delivery. I peeked past her shoulder. The living room was nearly empty. A single table, one chair, piles of trash bags against the walls. Ma'am, I'm really not supposed to come in," I said. "I can just leave it here." Her expression didn't change. She repeated softly, "Set it on the table inside." I felt a pit in my stomach, but placed the bag just past the doorway, backing away slowly. She shut the door without another word. My hands trembled as I walked back to my car. Across the street, I noticed movement. A tall man standing under a broken street lamp watching me. He didn't move or speak. I slipped into the driver's seat, muttering, "Nope, not tonight." But when I tried to shift into drive, the car wouldn't budge. My stomach sank. Someone had locked a homemade wheel clamp was on the front tire. Panic hit me all at once. I looked up. The man from across the street was walking toward me slowly, deliberately, his boots crunched on the pavement. The street was dead silent except for the wind rustling trash in the yard. I tried to start the engine again. Nothing. I fumbled for my phone. No signal. No, I weighed my options. Fight, run on foot, risk leaving the car behind. My heart thumped so hard I could feel it in my ears. He reached the driver's window and knocked twice, flat and calm, almost testing the glass. His other hand gripped a bent metal pipe. "Open the door," he said, voice low and even. My throat went dry. I shook my head. "No," I muttered, fumbling. I hit the accelerator hard. The clamp snapped with a metallic crack. Sparks flew under the tires as the car lurched forward. The man slammed his pipe against the trunk, rattling metal and bone, but I didn't stop. I floored it down the street, heart hammering, eyes darting to every shadow. I didn't breathe until I reached a 24-hour gas station on the other side of town. My hands shook so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel as I pulled up to the pumps. The clerk gave me a curious glance. "Rough night?" he asked. I slammed the car into park, practically yelling, "Wheel clamp, I need the police, someone." There was a guy, a woman. He nodded quickly and called it in. I repeated everything in short, frantic sentences. Officers arrived within minutes and took my statement. They promised to check Sycamore Street, but the woman and man were gone. All that remained was the broken clamp lying in the road. I sat on the curb, trembling, staring at the gas station's neon lights buzzing overhead. I could still see her hollow eyes, hear the calm knock, feel the weight of being watched. In the days that followed, I replayed it over and over. Why had she insisted I place the food inside? Why the man with the pipe? Were they targeting drivers? Was it just random chaos or something worse? Sleep became difficult. Every time my phone pinged with a delivery, I flinched. I refused anything after midnight. I went back to Sycamore Street once during the day, trying to see if anything could explain it. The house was even more decrepit than I remembered. Trash piled up around the edges, weeds clawing at the porch. The air smelled stale, abandoned, but no one was there. The police never found them. The wheel clamp was analyzed and stored as evidence. That was it. No arrests, no explanation, just a lingering sense of unease. Proof that danger sometimes waits quietly until you show up. Weeks later, I was driving during daylight, heading to a regular delivery, and a car swerved too close. My heart leapt into my throat. That memory, the street lamp, the wheel clamp, her hollow stare, hit me like a hammer. I realized I would carry it forever. Sometimes fear comes not from being chased, but from encountering situations you weren't prepared for. Trusting your instincts, setting boundaries, and avoiding unnecessary risk isn't cowardice. It's survival. I never ignored gut feelings again, and I made sure to stick to procedures even if it seemed rude or inconvenient. It wasn't paranoia, it was caution. Life will sometimes put you in situations that seem harmless at first, but instinct and caution are your best allies. Trust your gut, enforce boundaries, and never take unnecessary risks. Survival often depends on awareness, quick thinking, and the courage to say no when something feels wrong. I never planned to return to retail work so soon, but eviction notices don't pause for mental health leaves. My name is Jules Davenport. I'm 33, and after a third inpatient stint over the past 2 years, I took the part-time cashier shift at the Family Dollar on Mayfair Boulevard in Tulsa. I promised myself I was only there for bills, not for healing, not for closure. The store smelled of stale bleach and damp cardboard, tiles cracked above ceiling lamps that flickered every couple of minutes. Staff moved through aisles like ghosts, avoiding the back restroom near the stockroom, closed for maintenance, everyone said, ever since a homeless woman died inside last winter. Rumor had it the smell took hours to be noticed. That Sunday was brutal. First of the month crowd at checkout. I hadn't eaten. My anxiety meds made my vision blur. At about 6:45 p.m., I whispered to my manager I needed the restroom. He hesitated. Use the front one by aisle 3, he said softly. That one's open again. Open again. I remembered the rumors, but my stomach twisted. I nodded and walked. Inside, light was dim, as if flickering too, but no hum. The mirror above the sink had a deep crack twisting downward like a fractured vein. The air was unnaturally cold, like it held a memory. I sat in the stall, breathing slow. Soon a faint scent crept close, something sweet and sour, perfume mixed with something acidic, nauseating. And then a girl's voice, soft and ragged, came from the adjacent stall. I don't feel good, she wheezed. My heart thundered. I stood. The stall next to me had been empty when I entered. I glanced under the partition. No feet. Silence. Then the voice, thinner now. It's too hot in here. I bolted out. Room was empty, but the mirror was fogged as if someone had breathed on it from behind, written in fresh streaks. I thought someone would find me. My skin crawled. I rushed back to the register, pale, trembling. I didn't speak. I barely rang a bell. The customer left confused. I stared at the floor until my shift ended. After I punched out, I wanted answers, but I doubted my own mind. I returned to the restroom, hands shaking long after closing when the store was silent and lights dim. I flicked the light switch. Nothing. Held the door open by its frame. The mirror was clean. No words. I leaned closer. There was a flyer taped at the upper corner, water damaged, torn at the edges. I peeled it gently. A photo of a young woman, Leah Rose, 24, reported missing 2 years ago. Last seen entering the same restroom, a customer said. I stared at my reflection, then to the cracked mirror's edge. For a heartbeat, I saw something at my side, a faint outline, hollow cheeks, sleeves hanging loosely, then nothing. I sat cold on the floor, hugging my knees. My mind raced. Was I hallucinating under med stress? Did that voice belong to me? I slipped home. At 2:00 a.m. the message repeated, jagged breath, soft echo. I thought someone would find me. I sat up dizzy. That wasn't my voice, but maybe it was. My past with self-harm and depression gnawed at me. In my room, I whispered to the dark, did I imagine her? The next few days felt like walking underwater. Every shift, I avoided that front restroom. I covered it mentally, but I couldn't escape the memory of Leia's face. I researched missing persons files, online articles, local forums. I found a single item. Leah Rose from Tulsa, missing May 7, 2021. No leads. Family posted flyers outside that store. No closure. One afternoon after work, I sat in my apartment on cheap carpet, sobbing. My therapist had told me, if you feel safe going back, maybe go. I scheduled myself. I went during closed hours again, flashlight in hand, heart pounding. The restroom was empty. I shone the beam over the cracked mirror. Nothing. I brought paper and pen, traced the crack pattern. I pressed ear to mirror. Nothing. But then I smelled it again, that sick perfume, acidic sweetness, strong and close. I spun. Silence. I whispered aloud, tears trailing down my face. Illa, is that you? No voice, but in my breath I felt an answer, not in sound, but in memory. I thought about the homeless woman who died there. Maybe it was Leia's ghost, terrified and alone. A woman in an ordinary store, forgotten. Later at night, I felt watched in my bedroom, not fear, but sorrow. Maybe it wasn't hallucination. Maybe it wasn't recovery. Maybe it was recognition. I decided I had to speak up. I found the old flyer from Leia's mother online. I printed copies, laminated them. I left them at the store entrance, taped to the customer service board. I wrote a letter to the police chief, asked about the back restroom and missing persons, asked if the city ever checked the store's history. I also wrote a note to Yayla's family. I hear you, I see you. And I dropped it into an envelope with my name signed. I mailed it. Nothing changed in the store, but I felt something shift inside me. I no longer saw the restroom as my undoing. I saw it as a threshold. One evening, manager approached me, his face pale. We got a call. Someone taped flyers. Owner wants to know who. I said, a concerned person. He stared at me, maybe reading guilt, maybe empathy. He nodded slowly. At the store entrance, I witnessed an older woman staring at the flyers. She turned, looked at me, recognized something, didn't speak. I quit soon after, said it was for health. They accepted without question. When I packed up my jacket and name tag, I stared at the stock room door. Imagined Illa fatting behind it. I waited, saw nothing. But tonight, after weeks, I still smell it. Sweet, sour perfume and sickness. In supermarkets, I avoid cracked mirrors. If I see cracked glass anywhere, my heart thumps. I've started volunteering at a local crisis hotline. I want to give voice to lost souls, people who feel forgotten, and I still look behind the mirror. Sometimes when I'm home after dark, I no longer fear it. I breathe into that space. You are not forgotten, I'm here. Sometimes the world overlooks those who suffer in silence. A cracked mirror and a quiet voice can hold more truth than anything we see in daylight. Our stories may feel forgotten, but when someone listens, acknowledges, and acts, healing begins. Be someone who sees the unseen, hears the unheard, and refuses to let pain go unspoken. I never thought I'd be the type of person to take a night shift at a roadside motel in rural Kentucky. But life doesn't always hand you the choices you want. My name's Hannah Walker. I'm 24, a writer at heart. I had dreams, short stories, submissions to literary magazines, maybe a book someday. But my dad had a stroke 3 years ago and my mom needed me. Graduate school went on hold, bills piled up. And here I was, working nights at Pine Hollow Lodge, trying to keep the lights on. The lodge itself was the kind of place that smelled faintly of mildew and cheap carpet cleaner. The building had seen better decades. The paint on the siding peeled in long strips, and the neon vacancy sign flickered constantly, like it had a nervous twitch. Mr. Kingsley, the owner, was a heavy-set man in his 60s who claimed nothing ever happened at night. I didn't believe him, but rent was rent. My first few weeks on the job were mostly boring, just answering phones, checking in truckers, and dealing with occasional complaints about the vending machine. The night I'll never forget started like most others. It was late March 2013 and the wind had picked up after a spring storm. The lobby heater was broken, so I was wrapped in a blanket, shaking slightly as I sipped lukewarm coffee. The soda machine in the corner clanked noisily, and two truckers argued over parking fees. I had to call Kingsley at home to get the matter settled. At 12:45 a.m., the door swung open, letting in a cold gust and a young woman drenched from the rain. She looked frantic, glancing over her shoulder before stepping into the lobby. "Please, do you have any rooms left? Doesn't matter which," she said, voice quivering. I nodded, keeping my tone steady. "We've got vacancies. Do you need help with your bags?" She shook her head, gripping her coat tighter. "No bags, just the room key, please." I handed her the key to room 14. She signed the log, her hands trembling, and then she was gone, disappearing into the rain before I could even ask her name. I remember feeling a twinge of worry, but I shook it off. Strange guests were common enough. The clock ticked on. Around 1:30 a.m., a man appeared at the office door. He was in his 40s, unshaven, wearing a damp flannel shirt. He leaned on the counter, eyes flicking toward the key rack. "Anyone checked in tonight?" A woman, dark hair, about this tall. My stomach sank. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't give out guest information." He smirked and tapped his fingers against the counter. "You'll tell me if you know what's good for you." I told him no, and after a few tense moments, he left. My instincts screamed that something was wrong. I locked the office door and called Kingsley. He told me to relax, probably just some drunk, he said, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I just met trouble. By 2:05 a.m., the phone rang. My heart jumped. The voice on the line was trembling. "The woman in room 14, he's outside. He's been circling. Please help me." Adrenaline shot through me. I grabbed the master keys and ran through the rain toward room 14, heart hammering. My sweatshirt clung to my skin, soaked from the storm. The door was slightly ajar. My instincts told me to be careful, and I eased inside. The woman pressed herself against the wall, eyes wide. I noticed her shaking uncontrollably, pointing toward the bathroom. I took a deep breath and asked quietly, "Are you okay? What's happening?" Before she could answer, the man from earlier stepped out of the shadows, blocking the doorway. His presence was massive, the kind that makes your throat dry instantly. "This doesn't concern you," he growled. My voice shook as I replied, "You need to leave right now." He stepped closer, but I slammed the door, locking it with trembling hands. The storm outside roared and the rain pounded against the roof like fists. I dialed 911 from the room phone, whispering our location. For 10 minutes, the man pounded on the door. His voice echoed through the hall as he shouted the woman's name. She sobbed quietly, muttering, "He's my ex." I thought I lost him. I stayed calm, crouched behind the door, gripping the keys like a weapon. My mind raced through every scenario I'd learned in safety training. Don't confront, stay secure, wait for help. I could feel my pulse in my ears, counting the seconds like a heartbeat of terror. Through the storm, headlights pierced the rain. The sound of sirens grew closer. I stayed crouched, whispering reassurances to the woman, holding her hand until the officers stormed the lodge. The man bolted into the woods before they could reach him. The police searched, but he was gone. I gave my statement, and the woman was taken into protective custody. Kingsley shook his head and said, "You handled that better than most." But inside, I felt shaken, a mix of relief and lingering fear that clung to my skin like wet clothes. For weeks afterward, every creak in the lobby sounded like pounding fists. Every rainstorm made me jump. I noticed subtle sounds I had never paid attention to before. The way the lobby floorboard shifted, the tapping of the vending machine against the wall, the occasional drip of water from the ceiling. Even during normal shifts, I kept my keys close, my flashlight ready, my instincts sharpened. I stopped leaving the office unattended, locked every door, and double-checked security cameras obsessively. The fear had become a teacher, pushing me to respect intuition and vigilance. In the quiet moments, I returned to my notebook. My short stories, once fictional escapes, now reflected tension, awareness, and survival. The line I kept scribbling over and over was simple, but it carried everything I had learned. The storm never ends. Months later, the memory of that night still lingered. Even when the lodge was quiet, even during calm evenings, I could feel the weight of fear in my chest. I understood something vital. Danger doesn't always appear obvious. It can lurk in plain sight, hidden in moments of distraction or assumptions. I kept working at the lodge for a while, but I never ignored a gut feeling again. I became assertive, cautious, and more attentive to signs others might dismiss. The night taught me that survival wasn't just about strength. It was about awareness, preparedness, and having the courage to act when something feels wrong. The woman in room 14 had been terrified and alone, and my actions, staying calm, listening, helping her, had made a difference. Fear and courage can coexist, and small acts of attentiveness can protect lives in ways we can't always foresee. Life will place us in moments of hidden danger where instincts and awareness are our most vital tools. Courage isn't just confronting fear. It's listening to your gut, setting boundaries, acting decisively, and looking out for others when they cannot protect themselves. Being alert, prepared, and compassionate can turn a potentially disastrous night into survival and hope. I never thought I'd end up here, staring at the drive-through speaker at 2:45 a.m., wondering how my life got so complicated. I'm Kayla Monroe, 24, single mom to a 3-year-old whirlwind named Eli, juggling night classes and a job at Burger Barn in Dayton, Ohio. I always joke that the drive-thru is a confessional booth, a place where people spill their guts over fries and soda, but beneath the smiles I carry a quiet fear. Our location sits just off an empty highway exit, tucked between a shuttered gas station and a strip of weed-choked lots. I know the place screams vulnerability. I've been working here for 6 months, the graveyard shift giving me daytime hours with Eli while my sister Lauren babysat at night. Most nights are slow. The hum of the fryer and the occasional bell from the front door my only companions. I keep my eyes on the dark parking lot, my heart racing whenever headlights appear. Tonight was slow, almost painfully so, and I was wiping down the counter for the 3rd time when a battered gray sedan eased up to the window. The man behind the wheel looked older than his mid-30s, stubble patchy across his jaw, eyes hidden behind dark shades even though it was midnight. He ordered only a small soda. "You working alone tonight?" His voice rasped, a tone that made my stomach knot. I lied. "No, my manager's in the back counting money." He chuckled softly like he knew something I didn't. "Smart," he said, and something in the cadence of that word made my skin crawl. I tried to shake it off, chalking it up to nerves. 15 minutes passed, the kind that stretch into eternity, and the same sedan returned. This time there were 2 men inside, one fumbling with a ski mask. My heart jumped. I pulled the sliding window shut, my hands trembling. "Stay calm," I whispered to myself. "Just stay calm." Footsteps hit the pavement outside. I crouched behind the counter as a voice shouted, "The drawer, we know you're alone." Open the first gunshot hit the window, glass splintering, grazing my shoulder. Pain shot through me, hot and sudden. I scrambled toward the manager's office, fumbling with the lock before collapsing behind the heavy door. My shirt was soaked in blood, but I didn't have time to think. I dialed 911, hands shaking so violently I could barely press the buttons. Footsteps lingered, voices arguing, then silence. When the cops arrived, the men were gone, leaving only shell casings and footprints in the grease-stained lot. My shoulder burned, my heart wouldn't stop hammering, and I realized just how fragile normal life could be. Surgery was a blur of lights, antiseptic, and the constant buzz of nurses. They stitched me up, told me I was lucky. It could have been worse, but lucky felt meaningless when I couldn't drive without flinching, couldn't walk without wincing at phantom footsteps in the dark. I never went back to Burger Barn. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see the man's face, hear the rasp of his voice, feel the cold barrel of fear pressing against my chest. Lauren stayed with me at the hospital, changing bandages, bringing Eli in carefully so he wouldn't scare me. He didn't understand fully, of course. He just wanted Mommy to smile again, but I kept my composure for him. I couldn't let him see the fear that now seemed to live in my bones. Days blurred into weeks. I avoided the exit off the highway, avoided the dark streets where shadows lengthened like fingers ready to grab me. Friends tried to check in, but I couldn't answer without reliving the night. Every night, Eli's soft breathing was a reminder that someone depended on me, that despite my terror, I had to keep moving. The police case went cold. Stolen plates, gloves, masks, they'd left no trace. The sense of justice I'd believed in vanished, replaced by the bitter truth. The world doesn't always protect you, and sometimes people get away with the worst. I tried returning to normal life. Night classes, daycare drop-offs, quick shifts at a new fast food place, but fear has a way of sticking. Every sudden noise made me flinch. Every unfamiliar car on the street made my pulse spike. I found myself planning escape routes in my mind just like I had on that night. I met customers, strangers, with a kind of weariness I hadn't known before. I smiled, laughed, nodded, but always measured my words. Trust didn't come easily. I couldn't let anyone get too close, not because I didn't want friends, but because I couldn't risk another night where someone saw my vulnerability as an invitation. Months passed and I realized I couldn't live in constant fear. I moved cities, took a new job, and slowly let Eli's laughter fill the empty spaces that fear had carved into my life. Therapy helped me talk about what happened, helped me confront the trembling shadows in my mind. I learned to lock doors with confidence, to keep my head up when walking alone at night, to prepare without letting paranoia rule me. I even started joking with coworkers again, though I still watched the parking lot a little longer than I should. But each day I rebuilt a little of the life that night had tried to take from me. I never stopped thinking about that man's first words, "You working alone tonight?" It wasn't just a question, it was a warning. Life has a way of testing you when you're most vulnerable, and sometimes survival isn't about fighting back. It's about staying calm, thinking ahead, and protecting those who rely on you. Eli reminds me daily why I endure, why I face fear instead of letting it rule me. The world isn't fair, danger doesn't announce itself, but resilience, careful planning, and courage, these are the things that can turn a night of terror into a lifetime of lessons. Honesty and vulnerability are precious, but sometimes safety must come first, and though fear lingers, it no longer controls me. Life is fragile, but it's also worth every careful step I take, every late-night shift I survive, and every moment I share with my son. Life can be unpredictable and dangerous, but resilience, awareness, and courage allow us to protect ourselves and those we love, even in the darkest of nights. I never thought I'd end up stocking shelves at supermarket in Tulsa at 1:30 a.m., but life has a funny way of handing out surprises. I'm Rachel Dawson, 29, former nursing student, now working nights at a 24-hour store after my mom's sudden illness drained both my time and my savings. The hospital bills piled up faster than I could keep track, and night shifts gave me a chance to catch a few hours of sleep during the day before hopping back to hospital visits. Most nights were quiet, the hum of fluorescent lights, the low rattle of shopping carts, the occasional drunk customer. It became a rhythm almost comforting. Tyler, my coworker at the registers, often joked that I was one of the few humans capable of enjoying aisle monotony. "At least no one's breathing down your neck," he'd say, and I'd laugh, appreciating the small reprieve from chaos. But that night, the rhythm broke before it even started. Around 1:30 a.m., I was rearranging cleaning supplies in aisle 7 when I noticed a man walking toward me. His dark khakis were neat, his polo shirt crisp, and a reflective vest with security stitched across it. I froze. Our security guards always wore black tactical uniforms. This was wrong. My gut nodded immediately. He looked older, early 50s, gray hair, neatly combed, and he moved with a confidence that made my stomach churn. "Long night, huh?" he asked, stopping a few feet away. Voice was calm, too deliberate. "Yeah," I replied cautiously, pushing a box back into place. "Haven't seen you around before. They called me in from another branch," he said, smiling faintly. "Some theft problems lately." I nodded, forcing a smile, but my throat went dry. Something about the way he positioned himself, always just a little too close, always blocking my path, made me uneasy. I wanted to ask for ID as I'd been trained, but alone in the aisle, hesitation froze me. Tyler's voice crackled over the intercom, asking me to bring some stock up front. Relief washed over me, and I wheeled the cart toward the front. When I glanced back, he was still there, frozen smile intact, eyes tracking me like a predator studying prey. At the checkout, I quietly warned Tyler, "That guy is not wearing our uniform. Don't let him corner you." His face palled. Together we watched, alternating glances toward the man. He drifted through the store, circling back toward the exit, lingering near the toy aisle for nearly 10 minutes, pretending to read price tags, but his gaze never left us. I felt a knot tightening in my chest. This wasn't a random act, it wasn't a coincidence. My heart pounded against my ribs, adrenaline pushing me to make a decision. I couldn't confront him alone. I walked quickly to customer service where the night manager Paul was counting receipts. "Paul," I whispered, keeping my voice low. "There's a man claiming he's security. He doesn't have a badge and he's making us uncomfortable." Paul frowned, picking up the phone to call the real contracted security office. The response sent chills down my spine. No one had been sent. Paul's eyes widened as he turned to me. "Stay put, I'll handle this." When he approached the man, he was gone. Surveillance caught him slipping out into the parking lot, packing near a row of cars as if waiting for something or someone. By the time the police arrived, he'd vanished into the darkness. The days that followed were a blur of paranoia and hyper-awareness. I parked under the brightest light, checked my surroundings twice before leaving, and carried pepper spray even on short trips to the store. Shadows became more than just the absence of light. They became threats lurking just out of reach. Even with Tyler and Paul around, I felt alone. The idea that someone could wear authority like a costume. I get close without detection, linger unnoticed. It haunted me. Every reflective vest triggered my pulse to spike. Every stranger moving with purpose made me flinch. I tried returning to normal life, but my nerves betrayed me. Night classes became exercises in constant vigilance. Hospital visits felt tense as I scanned parking lots for shadowed figures, and sleep never came easily. The world had shown me that danger could disguise itself in trust, and I couldn't ignore it. Months passed and I realized I had two choices: let fear dominate my life or take steps to reclaim control. I started carrying a flashlight in my purse, rehearsing scenarios in my mind, and even took self-defense classes. Knowledge became my armor. I learned to read body language, to trust instincts, and to never let anyone position themselves in a way that made me vulnerable. Each precaution wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. I even started mentoring a few new night shift employees, teaching them how to recognize warning signs, how to protect themselves, and how to act without panicking. The night that man walked into the store wasn't just a scare, it was a wake-up call. Life has a way of testing boundaries, showing how easily trust can be manipulated. But it also taught me that fear, while natural, doesn't have to control decisions. Awareness, preparation, and courage can make a difference. Even now, years later, when I hear the hum of a store at night or the soft click of a card on tiles, I remember that night. I remember the reflection in his eyes, the way he moved like he owned the place. But I also remember my response, my instinct to protect myself, and the steps I took to reclaim safety. Life isn't fair. People will deceive. Danger will appear when least expected. But resilience, vigilance, and courage allow us to navigate the dark, protect ourselves, and come out stronger on the other side. Danger can hide behind authority or disguise, but awareness, preparation, and courage empower us to face threats and protect ourselves without surrendering to fear. I never thought I'd spend my spring nights pushing boxes down Mega Mart aisles, headphones in one ear, trying to memorize chemistry formulas during short breaks. I'm Samantha Clark, 20, a college freshman, and at the time my dad had just been laid off from his factory job. The family rent was stacking up and I needed a way to help. Night shifts seemed like the perfect solution. Quiet, lonely, yet strangely freeing. I got to own the hours most people avoided, and that independence felt good, even if it came with exhaustion that settled in my bones by 3:00 a.m. My routine was simple. Stock shelves, man the occasional register, take mental notes of every odd customer or creaking door. I like the stillness of the store late at night. There's something comforting about fluorescent lights humming overhead, the echo of a rolling cart through empty aisles, the faint beep of scanning a barcode in near silence. It's the kind of work that gives you time to think and observe without distractions. And for me, it was almost meditative until April 2nd, 2012. It was around 2:10. Chilly even with the heaters running. I was pushing a cart of cereal boxes down aisle 9 when I noticed a woman standing near the glass doors at the front of the store. She wasn't shopping, she didn't even move. Her frizzy hair was pulled back in a loose bun and she wore a faded denim jacket that looked like it had seen better decades. Her eyes were fixed on me, calm but intense, almost too steady. After a long pause, she stepped inside, smiling warmly. "Excuse me, sweetheart," she said softly. "Would you mind helping me with something? My back's been acting up and I can't lift a heavy box into my van." I hesitated. Store policy was clear. Never step outside with a stranger during your shift. "Not really allowed to step outside," I said, forcing politeness into my voice. I'm smile didn't falter. "Oh, come on, it'll only take a second. You look strong, much stronger than me." She laughed lightly, but her eyes didn't blink. She kept inching closer and my pulse started racing. Just then my coworker Marcus rolled by with another stock cart. He must have noticed something in my posture because he called out, "Sam, manager needs you in back now." Relief washed over me. I grabbed the excuse and walked off quickly, heart hammering, chest tight. Later, I peeked through the store's front windows. The woman was gone from inside, but now stood beside a dark van parked under a flickering light. The side door was slightly open and something shifted inside. A shadow crouched like it was waiting for me. I ran to the night manager, explaining everything in a trembling voice, asking for help with boxes. I don't trust her. There's a woman outside. He immediately locked the doors, which made me feel a fraction safer, and called the local police. By the time officers arrived, the van was gone and the woman had vanished. The responding officer gave me a serious look. We've had multiple reports of a woman fitting that description loitering outside late-night stores, he said. She always asks employees or customers for help with boxes. Keep your doors locked in your distance and call if you see her again. I went home shaking, replaying her smile in my mind. It seemed so harmless, so friendly. But now I realized how close I had come to putting myself in danger. The following weeks were tense. I started parking as close to the entrance as possible. My phone was my lifeline. I called my dad every night after my shift, asking him to talk me through walking to my car. I refused to carry anything unnecessary in my hands while leaving the store, keeping keys and pepper spray in my pocket. Every time the store was quiet, my eyes darted toward the glass doors. Every car or pedestrian made me flinch. I couldn't shake the image of that van door slightly ajar, waiting. It had changed the way I saw the night. Even familiar, mundane spaces could harbor hidden dangers. I took a self-defense class mostly for peace of mind. The training taught me how to stay aware of exits, maintain personal space, and act quickly if threatened. Each precaution wasn't paranoia, it was empowerment. I also began talking to new employees, warning them to never leave the store with strangers, to trust instincts, and to call for backup if unsure. The more I prepared, the more confident I felt. I wasn't living in constant fear anymore. I was taking control. Yet the memory of her calm smile and the open van door never left me. It served as a reminder. Danger can disguise itself in politeness. The woman didn't threaten with shouts or weapons. She asked politely, tested boundaries, and relied on the assumption that someone like me would comply. I realized that threats aren't always loud. They can be quiet, patient, and hidden in plain sight. Even now, whenever I work late, my eyes scan entrances, my hands stay ready, and my steps are deliberate. It's not fear, it's awareness. Life isn't always fair and danger doesn't announce itself, but preparation, intuition, and courage allow you to navigate even the quietest threats safely. Danger doesn't always yell. It sometimes asks politely. Trust your instincts, set boundaries, and protect yourself even when threats appear gentle or familiar. I never thought I'd end up working nights at a roadside motel. My name is Rachel Monroe, 26, and in November 2014, I found myself manning the front desk at Silverleaf Inn along Highway 41 outside Moan, Georgia. Life didn't go the way I imagined. I had spent my 20s sketching old buildings, dreaming of moving to Savannah for art school, but my mom's sudden illness forced me to stay home. Between medical bills and helping my younger sister, I had no choice but to take whatever work I could find. Silverleaf Inn wasn't glamorous. The carpet smelled of mildew. The walls were scuffed, and the neon sign outside flickered like it was gasping for life. The ice machine leaked constantly, and the water in the vending machine was always warm. Most nights were quiet, too quiet. But the silence brought a creeping unease, especially when I was alone. To cope, I often sketched the lobby while sipping bitter coffee, doodling cracks in the tile, or peeling wallpaper, imagining a world outside this fluorescent prison. On this particular night, the weather was against me. Cold rain pounded the glass doors and made the street lights outside shimmer in long streaks. The night had already been exhausting. A group of construction workers arguing about room keys, a guest shouting because the soda machine charged him twice, and the flickering lobby light that kept plunging parts of the office into shadows. My hands shook as I gripped the coffee mug like it was a lifeline. I tried to tell myself it was just another night, but there was something about the storm, about the deserted highway, that made the air feel heavy. It wasn't long before the first strange thing happened. Around 1:15 a.m., a man walked in. He was tall, wiry, with a gray coat soaked from the rain, and there was something in his posture that made me uneasy. He didn't greet me, he just asked sharply, "Is anyone staying in room 9 tonight?" I flipped through the logbook, frowning. No, sir, that room hasn't been rented in weeks." "Why?" He smiled tightly. "Then I'll take it." There was something off about the way he said it. Hesitant, I handed him the key, trying not to dwell on the feeling of dread pooling in my stomach. After he left, the inn fell silent again. I pulled out my sketchbook, trying to distract myself with the cracked tile and chipped baseboards. That's when I heard it. 3 faint knocks from the hallway leading to the guest rooms. My eyes darted to the security monitors. Nothing. I shook my head. It's probably just the pipes, I whispered to myself. Minutes later, the desk phone rang. The static made my teeth chatter, and then a whisper came through. "He's outside. Don't open the door." My stomach dropped. "Hello, ma'am, who is this?" But the line went dead. I held the receiver, my hand trembling, and for the first time that night I felt a surge of real fear. I grabbed the flashlight from under the desk, checking the doors and windows again. My heart raced as I walked the hallways, peering into empty rooms. Room 9 was closed, but something about the air felt heavier there. The rain outside pounded harder, and shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should. Even though I tried to rationalize it, storm, fatigue, imagination, the unease didn't fade. I kept thinking about that voice on the phone. Who could it have been? And how did they know about room 9? By 2:30 a.m. I was packing the hall again when I froze. Room 9's door stood wide open. The gray coat was draped across the bed, but the man was nowhere inside. I felt panic curl in my chest. From the parking lot, I glimpsed a barefoot woman in a nightgown walking toward the trees beyond the lot. Shouted, "Respond." She vanished into the shadows. "Ma'am, hey, you can't be out there. It's freezing." She didn't. I ran back to the office, fumbling with the phone, but there was no service. The lobby line was dead. My mind raced. Was the man watching me? Had the woman been real or a trick of my eyes in the rain? I checked the monitors obsessively. Then around 3:00 a.m. I saw him. The man from room 9 standing at the tree end staring at the lobby cameras. His posture was unnervingly still. His eyes fixed on me. My breath hitched. I thought of the storm, the isolation, and how small and vulnerable I felt. I didn't sleep until dawn, packing the lobby, clutching my flashlight. When the sun finally crept over the pines, I bolted outside. Room 9 was empty. No coat, no man, no trace. The barefoot woman gone. Everything seemed normal, yet I knew it hadn't been. Later, I dug into old motel archives and learned the history of room 9. In 1987, a young woman was last seen walking barefoot into those woods after renting it. Guests over the years had described a man asking for the room, always the same description. A chill ran through me. Even years later, I could remember the whisper, "He's outside." I quit that job within days, but the memory never left me. I realized the motel wasn't just a building. It was a container for fear, secrets, and shadows from the past. The world outside might seem quiet, safe, and ordinary, but sometimes danger and mystery lurk in the places you least expect. I kept sketching, of course. My notebooks were filled with drawings of hallways, trees, shadows, and broken tile. Art became my refuge, but every time I heard a faint knock or saw a figure in the dark, I remembered that night and the lesson it taught me. Vigilance is survival, and intuition is often the only thing standing between safety and peril. Life is unpredictable, and danger can appear when you least expect it. Trust your instincts, respect your boundaries, and never ignore the quiet warnings around you. Sometimes paying attention to small signs can be the difference between safety and harm. I never imagined that my first real taste of adult responsibility would be scrubbing floors at 2:00 a.m. in a cavernous supermarket. My name is Olivia Hayes. I was 19, a freshman at Springfield University, and I had always dreamed of acting on stage, not cleaning restroom mirrors under flickering fluorescent lights. But life has a way of throwing you off the script. My father had lost his trucking job. My mom was already working 2 part-time shifts, and rent wasn't going to pay itself. I needed money, and Pricemart Supercenter offered the only night shift I could get. From the very first night, I felt swallowed by the size of the store. Endless aisles of frozen foods, shelves stacked high with cans, and the low hum of refrigeration units that never seemed to turn off. Most nights it was quiet, almost painfully so, but the silence brought a strange kind of anxiety. Every squeak of a cart, every metal door rattling from the wind outside made me jump, and I was alone after closing, tasked with cleaning, stocking, and monitoring security cameras. That January night started like any other. The winter wind rattled the metal doors, and the heat barely worked inside. By 12:45 a.m., I had already handled a particularly grumpy customer who cursed at me for expired coupons and a teenager who had smashed a soda bottle on the floor just to get attention. My legs ached and I could feel the chill creeping in through my jacket, but I told myself it was just part of the grind. "Keep it together, Olivia. Just a few more hours," I muttered under my breath. I finished scrubbing the restroom mirrors and noticed that one of the doors jammed halfway open. I shoved it with all my strength, muttering, "Great, one more thing broken in this place." My hands were wet, my jacket damp from the heat and my own sweat. Even though I laughed at my frustration, there was a prickling unease I couldn't shake. Something about the emptiness of the store that night made the fluorescent lights feel dimmer, the aisles longer, and the shadows deeper. I moved toward the frozen food section, checking inventory and restocking shelves. The hum of freezers echoed like a low, steady whisper. I thought I heard something behind me, a scraping sound of shoes against tile. But when I turned, the aisle was empty. I shrugged, shaking my head, probably just the floor settling, I whispered. Still, a knot of tension tightened in my chest. By 2:10 a.m., I noticed that Aaron, my coworker, hadn't been seen in nearly an hour. He was supposed to be restocking dairy, but the aisle was empty. His jacket still hung on the breakroom chair. "Aaron," I called, my voice reverberating through the empty store. Silence. I walked toward the registers to call the manager's office. The landline buzzed with static, and my cell phone had barely one bar, enough to see the clock, not enough to make a call. I leaned against the counter, trying to calm myself when I heard it. A faint crackle from the intercom, followed by what sounded like quiet breathing. My heart thumped in my chest and I froze. "Hello," I whispered. "Nothing." The ceiling speakers hung silently above me, blank and lifeless. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was the wind rattling ducts. Maybe the store was settling. Maybe exhaustion was making me hear things, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I decided to check the stockroom exits. The side door was locked. I rattled it. Nothing. The front automatic doors were sealed shut. My stomach sank as I realized I was trapped inside. I forced myself to breathe. "It's fine. Morning staff will be here at 6. Just wait it out," I whispered. But my chest tightened. Every shadow seemed to stretch farther than it should. Every hum of machinery sounded like footsteps circling me. I pushed a cart down the aisles, trying to make myself feel in control. That's when the footsteps began, slow, deliberate scraping against tile. I spun around, empty. The sound moved behind me, then ahead, like someone was circling. I called out, "Aaron, come on, this isn't funny." Silence. Turning a corner near the frozen foods, I saw a shadow at the far end of the aisle. Motionless for a moment, it flickered, then disappeared. My pulse quickened. I grabbed a heavy mop handle, clutching it like a weapon. "Stay calm, just stay calm," I whispered. The shadow was everywhere and nowhere at once. By 3:05 a.m., I hid in the break room, locking the door. The phone lines were still dead. I checked the security monitors, grainy black and white images of empty aisles, until one camera showed movement, a figure standing near the registers. I leaned closer. "Please just be Aaron," I whispered. The figure turned. Its face was blurred, smeared like static. I curled into a corner, gripping the mop handle. Time stretched, each minute an eternity. I imagined every horror story I had ever heard about stores and night shifts, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. Still, the feeling of eyes on me wouldn't fade. When morning staff arrived at 6:02 a.m., the doors opened normally. No one else was in the building. Aaron had clocked out at 12:30 a.m. without telling me. Every aisle was empty, pristine. I quit a week later. Even now, years later, every time I step into a grocery store, I feel a chill, a weight on my shoulders. Shadows seem longer, corners darker, and sometimes I swear I hear footsteps when no one is around. That night taught me something about fear, responsibility, and awareness. It's not just the physical dangers that get you. It's the mind playing tricks, the isolation, and ignoring your instincts. Life can trap you in unexpected situations, and fear often comes when you feel powerless. Always trust your instincts. Stay aware of your surroundings and take responsibility for your safety. Awareness and calm thinking are the most important tools when facing uncertainty or isolation. They tell you a road trip heals things, that driving long stretches of highway clears your mind, lets grief settle into the cracks. I believe that, or maybe I needed to. After my mother died of pancreatic cancer, I left Denver with nothing but my camera gear, a full tank, and no timeline. She used to say, "The desert makes you honest." I figured she meant quiet still. So I set out to photograph forgotten places, abandoned gas stations, old diners, faded billboards, ghost towns with names half worn off their own welcome signs. My destination was Lake Tahoe, but I wasn't in a rush. I took back roads, dirt roads, sometimes no roads at all. That's how I ended up somewhere between LA and Battle Mountain in the high desert of Nevada, with my Subaru's dashboard lights blinking and the engine sputtering like it had swallowed dust. No cell signal. My GPS froze. I figured I'd driven off the map. Then through heat shimmer and dead brush, I saw it. A family dollar. It looked wrong, like someone had pasted it into the desert from another time. Its red and white sign flickered weakly, half the letters missing. I couldn't tell how I hadn't seen it sooner. No other buildings, no cars, just that low concrete box sitting under a copper-colored sky. I parked out front, grabbed my camera bag, and walked toward the glass door. It was cracked open just barely enough to invite someone desperate, which I was. The air inside was cold, unnaturally cold. It took a second for my eyes to adjust. The lights buzzed overhead, half were dead, the others blinked like a bad signal. The place smelled like old plastic, freezer burn, and something else. Wet dust. A motion sensor beeped as I entered, long and slow, almost tired. At the back stood an old man behind the register, bony hands folded neatly on the counter. He wore a faded vest. Name tag said Victor. I nodded, voice dry. "Is there a gas station nearby?" He didn't blink, just pointed down aisle 4 and said softly, "Go past the freezer. Phones are by the water jugs, don't sorry." He didn't repeat it, just looked at me like someone who'd said too much already. I started walking. The prepaid phones were covered in dust. Most were the old flip kind, scratched, dead, cracked. One still had a price sticker curling off. I picked it up, turned it over, and saw the blood. Not much, just a swipe across the screen like a finger had dragged it across a cut. I turned to ask Victor what the hell was going on. He was gone. No footsteps, no door chime, no echo, just gone. I spun around. The air felt different, thicker. The flickering bulbs above hummed louder now. Then I heard it, breathing, slow, labored breathing coming from behind the freezer aisle. That sound cut through every rational thought. It wasn't human, not in rhythm, not in scale. It sounded like something pretending to breathe. I remembered what the old man had said, don't go past the freezer, but the sound was getting closer. I backed up, nearly tripping over a mop bucket near the cleaning aisle. That's when I saw it. A small dusty pink backpack, the name tag read Sophie. I opened it. Inside was a crumpled flyer, stained and faded. A missing person notice. 9 years old, last seen in Eureka. The date on the flyer was 2015. I stared at it, tried to breathe. Then I heard the freezer door creak and I ran. The front door was locked. From the outside I pulled, slammed my shoulder against it. Nothing, no one out there. The desert was empty. I was alone. My fingers shook. I yanked out my phone. No signal. The screen flickered and died. I hit it with my palm as if that would help. It didn't. I sprinted through the aisles toward the back office, shouting for Victor. No answer. When I reached the door, I found it rusted shut. I rammed it with my foot 3 times before it gave way. The hinges screamed. Inside, it smelled like mildew and metal. A rotary phone sat on a desk unplugged. Filing cabinets lined the wall, old-school ones with handwritten tabs. I opened the top drawer. Inside were folders, each with a name written in red ink. First names, all children. All ended the same. Disappeared. No follow-up. The second drawer was the same. Names and dates going back decades. One read Sophie M. 2015. I staggered back, tripped over a cord. My camera fell from my shoulder. Then I heard a voice, a child's whisper from behind the wall. Don't go past the freezer. The lights flickered, then died completely. I found a wrench under the counter. Took me 10 minutes to pry open the back exit. The metal door creaked louder than thunder. I slipped out into the alley behind the store. The air outside felt wrong too. Dead wind, desert silence. I didn't look back. I ran through the dirt toward the vague promise of a road. My legs burned. The sun had long since dipped. Only twilight glowed behind the hills. I didn't stop until my knees gave. I waited there for what felt like hours. Then headlights. A county sheriff's cruiser pulled over. A man in his 50s stepped out, asked if I was okay. I must have looked like hell. There's a store back there. Family Dollar somethings, I stammered. He raised a hand. There ain't no store there, son. That building's been boarded up since 2016. Burned out, gas leak, 3 people died, places condemned. No, I was just inside. He gave me a long look. The kind people give when they think you've been in the sun too long. You sure you didn't fall asleep out here? I have photos, I said, fumbling for my camera. But when I pulled up the gallery, every shot was corrupted. Static blurs, nothing usable except one. The last, a figure standing behind the freezer glass, staring. They took me to the station in Eureka, gave me water, asked questions I couldn't answer right. I told them what I saw, what I heard, showed them the photo. They didn't know what to do with it. Could be a reflection, one officer said. Could be a prank. They didn't write a report. I drove out the next morning, didn't stop until I hit Reno. Didn't sleep that night either. I called a friend, told him part of it. He didn't say much, just listened. A few days later, I looked up missing children in Nevada. Sophie M. was real, 9 years old, last seen at a Family Dollar in Eureka. Her case had no updates, cold for 6 years. I didn't go back, but the photo still sits in my archive untouched. I don't show it to people, not anymore. Somewhere in that desert, behind that broken building, something waits. I don't know what. I only know I was never supposed to see it. Some places aren't on any map for a reason. The world forgets them, but they remember us. Curiosity might lead you into dark places, but not everything is meant to be discovered. Sometimes the past isn't lost, it's hidden. And if you stumble across it, the best thing you can do is leave it where you found it. I'm Vanessa Reed, 26, juggling student loans, a failed engagement, and the day-to-day grind of working the overnight shift. I had once dreamed of becoming an art teacher, painting and sketching in a classroom full of eager students, but financial realities had other plans. Now I spent my nights folding shirts, arranging dresses, and organizing racks from 10 p.m. to 6:00 a.m. Most nights were quiet, almost peaceful. I hummed to myself, swapped small talk with a few coworkers who rotated shifts, and found a strange rhythm in the aisles. The hum of fluorescent lights, the soft squeak of shoes on polished floors, and the occasional beep from the checkout scanners became my background music. I liked the independence, the sense that I owned the store while the rest of the world slept. That night it was cold enough to see my breath in the break room. I had just finished organizing the women's section when I noticed a tall man entering the store around 1:30. His baseball cap was pulled low, and a thick winter coat covered most of his frame. Normally I wouldn't have given it a second thought. Late-night shoppers often looked strange or eccentric, but something about him made me uneasy. He moved slowly, pretending to browse, yet somehow appeared in every aisle I moved to. When I offered my usual greeting, "Need help finding something?" he responded with a wide smile, unsettling in its intensity. "No, just looking, but I think I found something interesting." His eyes lingered on me longer than polite customer behavior should allow. I forced a polite smile and walked toward the kids' clothing section. Minutes later, I realized he had followed me. "Do you live nearby? I don't usually see you here during the day," he asked. I laughed nervously. "Customers, I work nights. Store policy says I can't discuss personal stuff with." He tilted his head, eyes sharp. "You're careful, I like that." My stomach sank. Something about that sentence felt more like a warning than a compliment. I needed to find safety fast. I hurried toward the stock room where my coworker Lay was unpacking boxes. I whispered, "There's a guy out there. He keeps following me, won't stop smiling." Lee peeked through the crack in the door and stiffened electronics for an hour before you noticed. "Creepy as hell. That guy, he's been circling." We informed the night manager, who said he'd keep an eye on the cameras. Relief was fleeting. Returning to the floor, I saw him waiting near the changing rooms. He lined in, his voice low. "You shouldn't ignore me. I could walk you home." My heart raced. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous. I backed away slowly, pretending to radio for assistance. The man finally moved toward the exit, but instead of leaving, he lingered in the parking lot under a flickering light. For over 15 minutes, he stood there, hands buried deep in his pockets, eyes tracking the doors. Police were called, but by the time they arrived, he had vanished. The description matched reports from other night shift employees at nearby stores. I couldn't stop thinking about him. Every noise in the parking lot made me jump. Every shadow seemed alive. I began leaving the store in groups, gripping my keys tightly, scanning the lot before even unlocking my car. The routine became ritual. Every trip outside was rehearsed in my mind, every possible threat accounted for, yet my fear lingered. I took a self-defense class and learned to trust my instincts more than anyone else's reassurances. I stayed aware of exits, avoided isolated areas, and kept my phone ready at all times. The empowerment was subtle but real. I wasn't paralyzed by fear anymore. I had tools, strategies, and awareness. I even shared these lessons with new employees, emphasizing the importance of boundaries, preparation, and listening to that inner voice when something felt off. Knowledge became my armor against someone who relied on subtle intimidation rather than outright violence. Danger doesn't always announce itself with shouting or threats. Sometimes it wears a calm smile, moves quietly, and tests boundaries. What terrifies isn't always the obvious. Sometimes it's the one who watches patiently, waiting for a mistake. Years later, I still avoid working nights. Every time I walk into a quiet store after hours, I scan entrances, I note exits, I trust my gut. Life isn't fair, and threats aren't always visible. But awareness, preparation, and courage allow you to navigate even the quietest, most subtle dangers. The scariest dangers aren't always loud. They sometimes wear a smile. Trust your instincts, stay alert, and never let politeness override safety. I never liked grocery shopping after dark. Something about the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the half-empty parking lots, and the strange stillness of big-box stores at night always put me on edge. But nursing doesn't come with predictable hours, and by the time I got off my Wednesday shift at St. Mary's, it was already past 8. I was bone-tired, still in my scrubs, hair knotted into a bun that had lost its battle with gravity hours ago. All I wanted was a hot shower and sleep, but marriage, as I'd come to learn in just 7 months, had its own demands. Ethan had been on my case for weeks about not cooking, about how I chose the hospital over him. He wasn't wrong that I'd been absent. 12-hour shifts swallow you whole. By the time I walked through our door, I barely had energy to microwave leftovers, let alone chop onions and stir sauces. Still, I hated the guilt trips, the digs about how marriage wasn't supposed to feel like living with a roommate, so I stopped at Target. It was January in Phoenix, colder than usual, and the lot was quiet. A couple of cars sat abandoned on the far side, one with a flat tire, another dusted in what looked like months of grime. The neon Target sign buzzed faintly, and I remember thinking the store looked tired, almost haunted. Inside, the greeter gave me a nod without a word. The place was too empty, the soundtrack of corporate pop echoing faintly off the polished floors. I grabbed a basket and made my way toward frozen foods, telling myself I'd grab some pizzas, a few microwave meals, maybe something I could toss into a skillet and call it dinner. The hum of the freezers drowned out everything else. I've stood in ICUs where machines beeped nonstop, but that sound, low, steady, electric, felt heavier somehow. I opened the glass door, frost biting my hand, and reached for a pizza when I noticed her. In the reflection 2 doors down stood a woman, old-fashioned gray coat, straight posture, face pale and unreadable. She wasn't shopping, she wasn't moving, she was staring at me. I snapped my head around. The aisle was empty. Only a cart sat nearby, half filled with random things. A box of cereal, 2 jars of pickles, and 3 identical frozen turkeys stacked like bricks. I frowned, glancing back at the freezer door. The reflection had already shifted to just me, my tired eyes, my messy bun. I laughed under my breath. "Get it together, Melissa. You're just tired." But the cart, it bothered me. I tried to shake it off. I had seen strange things before, especially after long shifts. Nurses joke about hallucinating call lights, swearing we see a patient's room lit up when it isn't. Fatigue does that. I told myself this was no different. I tossed 2 frozen meals into my basket and moved on. My sneakers squeaked faintly on the floor, but underneath that sound came another. The deliberate click, click, click of heels, not rushed, not casual, measured, steady. I stopped, pretending to study the frozen vegetables. The clicking stopped too, the silence stretched, then a soft voice whispered, "Excuse me." I spun around so fast my basket nearly slipped from my hand. Nothing, no one. My heart thumped against my ribs. I forced myself to breathe, to laugh it off. Maybe it was a customer in the next aisle. Maybe sound carried weird and empty spaces. Still, goosebumps rose on my arms. I pushed forward, but when I reached the other end of the aisle, my stomach dropped. That same cart, the one with the cereal, the pickles, and the turkeys, was waiting for me, placed perfectly across my path. The jars rattled faintly as if the cart had just been pushed. I looked around, my voice barely above a whisper. Hello, no answer. I backed up, gripping the basket tighter, when the freezer door beside me caught my eye. In its reflection stood the woman again, closer this time. That same pale gray coat, face drawn, eyes dark like empty sockets. I gasped and whipped around, nothing but rows of frozen peas and waffles. My phone buzzed in my pocket, jolting me. Ethan's name lit up the screen. "Why are you taking so long?" His voice snapped as soon as I answered. "Store, or are you lying again? Are you even at the ice?" Stared at the freezer door, my reflection pale, shaking. "Not now, Ethan," I whispered, then hung up. But when I glanced back at the glass, my reflection was smiling, wide, crooked, and I wasn't. The basket slipped from my hand, frozen pizzas and plastic trays skidding across the linoleum. My knees felt weak, and I bent quickly to grab the items, desperate for something normal to focus on. But when I lifted my head, I saw her again in the reflection, standing directly behind me, her hands stretched toward my shoulder. I spun hard in my throat. The aisle was empty. My breaths came shallow and fast. I shoved the groceries back into the basket, fingers shaking. This wasn't fatigue, this wasn't stress, something was here with me. I bolted toward the end of the aisle, nearly colliding with a young employee restocking sodas. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked, eyes wide. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice tight. I didn't slow down. I made for the self-checkout, tossing my groceries onto the scanner like they were on fire. The machine beeped cheerfully, oblivious to the dread clawing at me. My eyes darted to the black and white monitor above, the one showing customers at each register. My stomach flipped on the screen. I wasn't alone. The woman in the gray coat stood inches behind me, her face close enough to breathe down my neck. I screamed, dropping everything. People turned, startled. A mother covered her kid's ears, but when I looked up again, she was gone. I fled the store without my groceries, without looking back. And I swear on everything that as the automatic doors closed behind me, I heard her voice one last time whispering right at my ear, "Don't leave me here." By the time I reached my car, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. The night air was sharp, colder than it had any right to be in Phoenix. My breath fogged the windshield as I sat there gripping the steering wheel, staring at the automatic doors of Target. People walked in and out casually. Mothers with carts, teenagers with snacks, an older man in a baseball cap. None of them looked haunted. None of them screamed. And yet I felt like I had just run out of a burning building, lungs full of smoke. I turned the key and peeled out of the lot, headlights bouncing off the cracked asphalt. Halfway home, my phone buzzed again. "Ethan," I didn't want to answer, but my hands moved on their own. "Where are you now?" he snapped before I could speak. "Driving home," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't buy anything." I hesitated, trying to steady my breath. "When I get home, something happened at the store, I'll tell you." He sighed long and annoyed. "You don't want to cook, just say it." "Melissa, I'm tired of excuses. You always have some story." If his words stung more than I wanted to admit, I wanted to yell to tell him I had just seen something I couldn't explain, but I didn't have the strength. Instead, I drove the rest of the way in silence, knuckles white against the wheel. When I walked into our apartment, the place smelled faintly of beer and leftover pizza. Ethan sat on the couch, scrolling his phone. He barely looked up. "You're pale," he muttered. "Night shifts. You sure you weren't just imagining things? You work too many." "I know what I saw," I said, sharper than I meant to. He laughed. "So what? Some ghost in the freezer aisle. Do you hear yourself?" I wanted to argue, but the truth was I did sound crazy. And yet, even as I kicked off my shoes and sank onto the couch, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me like she had followed me home. Later that night, I went to grab ice from the freezer. The door creaked open, the light flickering. And there, faintly in the chrome reflection of the ice tray, I saw her again. Pale face, dark eyes, watching. I slammed the door shut, my heart in my throat. This wasn't over. Days turned into weeks, but the feeling never left me. Every time I opened the freezer at home, I half expected her face to be waiting. Sometimes I thought I saw the faint outline of her coat in the reflection. Other times I swore I heard that soft, whispered voice, "Don't leave me here." Ethan grew more impatient. He told me to stop acting crazy. that maybe I should take fewer shifts or see someone. But what I couldn't tell him, what I didn't even want to admit to myself, was that this wasn't stress. Stress doesn't follow you home. Stress doesn't smile at you through your own reflection. One night after another long shift, I sat alone at our kitchen table. The hum of the refrigerator filled the room. I stared at the freezer door, my own reflection faint in the white surface, and I asked out loud, "Who are you?" Silence, just the buzz of the fridge motor. Then faintly, almost like a sigh. I was left here, I froze, skin crawling. I wanted to run, but something in her voice. It wasn't anger, it wasn't malice, it was sorrow. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that cart, the jars of pickles, the 3 frozen turkeys, about how she appeared only in reflections, about the emptiness in her eyes. I'll never know her story, maybe no one will. But I can't shake the thought that some people die in lonely places, aisles of grocery stores, parking lots, motel, and they stay there desperate not to be forgotten. I don't shop alone at night anymore, and whenever I pass the freezer aisle in a store, I keep my eyes down. But even now, years later, when I open my freezer at home, I sometimes catch her waiting. Not always, just enough to remind me she's still there. Not all ghosts are made of malice. Some are born of loneliness, of lives cut short in places no one remembers. But the living, people like me, have a responsibility too. We can't dismiss our fears, can't drown them in work or pretend they're in our heads just because others don't believe us. What I learned that winter night is simple. Listen to yourself, trust your instincts, and never assume the quiet, ordinary places in life are as safe as they seem. I'm Lucas Bennett, 27, a community college dropout trying to keep my younger sister fed and out of trouble. After my parents' divorce, life became a series of compromises, and night shifts at this store were one of them. Mechanic school had been my dream once, but dreams don't pay the bills, and my rusty pickup sure as hell didn't fix itself. The aisles at night are quiet, almost eerily so. Fluorescent lights hum overhead, and the soft clatter of shopping carts echoes like ghosts wandering between shelves. I joke with friends that Dollar Depot after midnight feels more like a ghost town than a store. It's mostly empty, just me and the occasional customer wandering in, staring at cheap household goods like they're treasures. It was a Thursday around 12:40 a.m. when the door chime rang, breaking the monotony. An older man shuffled in, gray hair, thinning trench coat, brushing the floor. His hazel eyes never seemed to blink, and his slow, deliberate steps echoed unnaturally in the empty aisles. He carried a pack of batteries and a can of soup. When I rang him up, he leaned close, whispering steady, rehearsed almost like he had said it 100 times before. "There's a devil all the time." His voice was, I forced a chuckle, unsure how to respond. Yeah, this place gets its fair share of weirdos." He didn't smile. He placed exact change on the counter, tapped it twice, and walked out without another word. That phrase stuck with me. All night I kept replaying it, half laughing at myself for being spooked by a stranger's nonsense. I tried shrugging it off, telling myself it was just one of those odd moments you forget after closing. But something about the way he said it, the calm, deliberate tone, set my nerves on edge. By Sunday, I thought I had dismissed the man entirely. I stayed on night shifts, sticking to routines, checking the parking lot, making sure doors were locked. Around 2:15 a.m., the bell rang again, jolting me. 2 masked men stormed in, one waving a pistol. "Empty the register now," the gunman shouted. My hands shot up instinctively. My mind raced. Eli, my sister, my life, all flashed in an instant. I took a cautious step backward, heart hammering, and tried to stay calm. But before I could reach the till, a car outside honked or screeched. I don't even remember exactly, and the gunman panicked, firing a shot into the ceiling. Chaos erupted, but in a surreal way, everything slowed. They ran, bolted past me into the parking lot, diving into a white panel van, waiting like a ghost among the shadows. I stumbled behind the counter, dialing 911, voice shaking as I tried to explain what had just happened. When police later reviewed the footage, my stomach sank. The driver of the van, the one who coordinated the escape, the one calmly sitting behind the wheel, was the same gay-haired man from Thursday. Same trench coat, same steady eyes. The phrase he whispered in my ear suddenly made sense in the most terrifying way. It wasn't nonsense, it was a warning. For weeks after, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always watching. I walked the aisles carefully, never leaving any corner unchecked. Even during daytime shifts, the store felt different, haunted by memories, shadows, and the echo of "there is a devil all the time." I refused to work alone. Every night I insisted on a second employee. I never left the store without checking the parking lot multiple times, and every door was double locked. My sister noticed my anxiety, asked if I was okay, and I forced a smile, telling her I was just tired. But inside, I was terrified. Months passed. Police followed leads, found the van abandoned in a pine forest, complete with sleeping bags, empty food wrappers, and maps of other small-town stores. They identified the man as Harold Mason, part of a group responsible for multiple robberies in northern Arizona, but they didn't catch everyone. My gut told me someone else from the crew was still out there, still watching. I started carrying a flashlight and pepper spray, rehearsing scenarios in my head. Every strange customer triggered a small panic reflex. I became vigilant, cautious, alert in ways I hadn't been before. Knowledge and preparation became my armor, my way to reclaim control over life that had threatened to slip from me. That night changed me. It taught me that danger can arrive quietly, that a calm voice and steady eyes can hide intent as deadly as any weapon. I learned to trust my instincts, to act without hesitation, and to always prioritize safety over pride or routine. Even now, years later, the echo of Harold Mason's whisper lingers in my mind. I keep doors locked, lights bright, and eyes open. Life isn't fair. Threats appear when least expected, but awareness, vigilance, and preparedness empower us to face those threats without surrendering to fear. Danger often hides in plain sight, and intuition, preparation, and vigilance are essential for navigating a world where appearances can deceive, and safety is never guaranteed. I never expected that working nights at a roadside diner could feel like stepping into a ghost story, but that's exactly what it was like on the stretch of I-84 in eastern Oregon. I'm Hannah Cooper, 23, a college student trying to scrape together enough money to pay tuition. I had taken the night shift at a small diner miles from any real town because it offered flexible hours and the promise of steady tips. Most of the day it served truckers, travelers, and the occasional lonely local, but after midnight the place felt abandoned. Like the hum of neon lights and the occasional rumble of passing semis were the only life in sight. The diner itself was old. Formic tables scratched from decades of use, vinyl booths cracked at the seams, a jukebox that seemed more ornamental than functional. I shrugged off the weird little things at first. Lights flickered in the kitchen. The jukebox sometimes started playing old country songs, even when unplugged, and cold drafts swept across the empty dining room. I told myself it was just an old building settling at night, the wiring and plumbing acting up. That fall, during my first week, the night felt longer than I expected. Most of the time, I cleaned tables, restocked napkins, and refilled sugar containers while listening to the wind howl against the diner's walls. Every passing semi reminded me that the highway outside never really slept, and I sometimes felt like I was in a world of my own, separate from everything else. But the first night that storm rolled and changed everything. It was around 1:45 a.m. when he walked in. The man, tall with a long coat and a hood casting his face in shadow, sat silently in the corner and ordered nothing but black coffee. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching everything, cataloging the diner like it was his private museum. As I cleaned nearby tables, I noticed him scribbling on a small scrap of paper. When I brought his coffee over, he didn't speak a word, just nodded. Curiosity got the better of me, and I peeked at the paper. Written in sharp, deliberate letters were the words, "Leave before midnight." I froze. My stomach knotted. My spine refused to fade. Probably some weird prank, I muttered to myself, but the chill, and over the next few nights I started noticing patterns. Around 11:30 p.m. the diner seemed darker than it should have been. The storm rattled the windows and I would hear footsteps in the hallway leading to the storage area, but when I checked, nothing was there. The lights flickered violently and the jukebox started playing that same haunting melody from before despite the fact that it was still unplugged. I gripped the counter, my pulse racing. Every creak of the floorboards felt amplified. My instincts screamed that I wasn't alone, that someone or something was there waiting. Then around 12:05 a.m. he returned. This time he didn't sit. He stood near the door, staring out into the storm, his movements calm, deliberate, almost too quiet. I realized my phone had no signal, leaving me completely isolated except for him. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. He shook his head and slipped another note under the counter. I picked it up, hands trembling. "Not safe here, leave." I swallowed hard. The words weren't threatening. They were almost clinical, a warning rather than a challenge, but they carried a weight that made my stomach flip. Suddenly, the power cut out entirely. The diner was plunged into pitch-black silence. Shadows moved along the windows, distorted by the flashing lightning. My heart pounded so hard I thought he might hear it. I fumbled for the emergency flashlight under the counter, the beam cutting through the darkness in shaky circles. Every instinct told me to leave immediately. I edged toward the back exit, moving quietly, careful not to make a sound. A scraping noise behind me made my stomach drop. I could have sworn it was the coat brushing against the floor. I kept my focus on the door, my legs trembling, my hands clenching the flashlight like a lifeline. Finally, I burst outside into the cold, rain-drenched night, slamming the door behind me. I ran to my car, fumbling with keys as the storm pelted me, my breath coming in short, terrified gasps. Doors locked, I waited in the car until the storm passed, staring at the diner through rain-streaked windows. The next day I called my manager. I asked cautiously, "Has anyone else experienced weird things at the diner?" "Yes," he said. Previous employees have reported strange activity, notes, flickering lights, unexplained sounds, but no one ever found the cause. The diner remained open, but I never returned. Even months later, I avoided that stretch of I-84 at night. Every dimly lit diner along the road reminded me of that stormy evening, of the man who seemed to appear and vanish at will, and of the notes that whispered one thing: danger can linger in silence. Vigilance doesn't just mean paying attention to obvious threats. Sometimes the danger is quiet, subtle, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment. That man didn't chase me, didn't shout, didn't show a weapon, but he commanded fear with presence alone. Since then, I've learned to trust my instincts, to respect warnings, even when they don't make immediate sense, and to never ignore the little signals that something is off. I still take precautions when working late, when parking in empty lots, when alone in quiet spaces. Awareness and intuition are tools no one can take from you. Danger doesn't always announce itself with noise or violence. Sometimes it waits in silence, in shadows, in the small signs you might be tempted to ignore. Trust your instincts, act quickly, and never underestimate what can hide in quiet moments.